Previously on the Random Trade Review, we covered the long-running Amerimanga series Gold Digger by Fred Perry, via some anthology appearances, the initial mini-series, and then the first story arc of the ongoing series, which was called The Curse. We were introduced to the Diggers family, mainly archaeologist and adventurer daughter Gina and her adopted Were-Cheetah sister Brittany. The two would wind up fighting a dragon over an ancient time machine from the future, hiring two elves named Misha and Tark along the way. Then they traveled to the mythical cities of El Dorado and Atlantis, the former of which contained the Kreen, a race of cat-like aliens who resembled Were-Cheetahs, whose prince, Stripe, eventually became Brittany's chief love interest. Along the way, we met Ace Koss, the personal pilot of the Diggers family, along with his girlfriend, Penny Pincer, who is also Gina's former college frenemy. After saving both cities, the Diggers search for a treasure on the Iranian-Afghan border, where they rescue Gen, a Jinn-Rakshasa hybrid. Gen would guide them to a treasure room that was empty save for one bracelet. However, the bracelet activated a curse on both sisters, and an attempt to expunge said curse wound in the creation of a new Digger's sister, Brianna. Now, they technically refer to Brianna as a sister of the Diggers family, though I guess if you get into technicality, she's actually more of a daughter, given that she has the DNA of both Gina and Brittany. Yeah, I know, it's kind of confusing. Anyway, today we're getting into the remaining part of the Gold Digger Archives Volume 1 by entering into a story in which Brittany has been invited back to El Dorado by Stripe, unbeknownst to her that it's actually part of an elaborate trap, but set up by Stripe's ex-girlfriend Tanya. Anyway, we're starting with the story, Tooth and Claw. In the realm of Eden, the werewolf Jeddah nurtures her newborn child. Setting the baby down to practice some fighting maneuvers, the peace gets interrupted by the sudden appearance of Brittany, who grabs the child and begins holding it hostage. We had met Jeddah and her husband Tavian in the previous story arc, where it's explained that werewolves have a long-running feud with the Were-Cheetahs, with the most extreme example being the brutal slaughter of Brittany's birth family. Also, the couple's child is named Pojo. Tavian arrives and attempts to reacquire Pojo, only for Brittany to teleport away. Jeddah then knocks Tavian out so that she can pursue Pojo's abductor through a portal. It turns out that Brittany here was actually a magical construct created by Tanya as part of her plan, as El Dorado's Oracle has informed the real Brittany that they have discerned her actual date of birth, which just happens to be that very day. While that plays out, Penny Pincer contacts Gina Diggers to inform her that the Atlanteans have a large award for the three, that being Penny, Gina, and Ace, are to actually claim. However, they have to do it in person, and that means taking off from the airport pretty soon. Also, Theodore Diggers, the sorcerer patriarch of the Diggers family, has sensed Brittany's pending danger and teleported off to El Dorado to try to help. Back in El Dorado, Tanya leads Brittany away, claiming that Stripe has a special thing to set up, only to teleport the Were-Cheetah into a cave. The funny thing is, Stripe actually does have something in mind. A wedding proposal. Unfortunately, if we're operating by action movie logic, he's doomed. In the cave, Brittany is attacked by none other than Jeddah, who demands to know what happened to Pojo. Meanwhile, the construct Brittany appears to dump Stripe in public, only for Theodore Diggers to arrive, suss out the magic, and use it to obliterate her, before teleporting to rescue Brittany. However, shortly after he arrives in the cave, Theodore winds up getting a death slash from Jeddah. This winds up intensifying the tenacity between the two women as they fight. However, all that is interrupted by Tavian, who arrives and tries to explain everything. Also, Theodore Diggers was able to magically heal his wounds. Elsewhere, Gina arrives at the airport only to find Ace's plane taking off, because it turns out that Penny Pincer lied and said that Gina turned down the reward. However, Gina has actually rigged her flying car with a teleportation module, meaning that she can just beam on board the ship and wind up confronting Penny. However, the two have to put aside their differences as the ship is attacked by a trio of sky pirates, who Ace has a long history with. The leader of the Sky Pirates challenges Ace to a race for his half of the reward, and winds up actually losing, thanks to the combo work of Gina and Brittany, who, after claiming the reward, wind up becoming enemies again. Back in El Dorado, Tanya realizes she's been found out and quickly sets about activating an army of golems to fight off her new attackers. Ah, so they're Jewish alien space cat people. The golems spring forth the wall, and it's only thanks to Theodore's magic that the group is able to get by them and onto Tanya to wind up facing her.
It also helps that Stripe has also found out Tanya at this point and managed to slip into the room and grab Pojo while Tanya is distracted by her attackers. Tanya winds up being defeated and getting banished to Eden, where she spends the rest of her time living in a small cage. As things begin to wrap up and everyone starts preparing to head home, Stripe decides to try to propose again, only to chicken out at the last second. A few days later, Brittany elects to take Brianna on a shopping spree in New York City, but as they exit Saks Fifth Avenue, they get held up by a supervillain named Slasher. It's then that a hero named Avenger arrives, and it appears that Avenger has some type of past with Brittany.
Avenger just happens to be Danielle Carter. No relation. She is actually Brittany's ex-college roommate.
After Slasher is taken down and Danielle's identity is revealed, the group heads back to Danielle's apartment where Brianna confesses to a bad failed attempt to seduce Gen a few nights earlier. As they begin a marathon of Julia Roberts movies, the group fails to realize that they're being watched. Suddenly, a group of people clad in outfits similar to Slasher come crashing into the apartment. Danielle can't enter the fray due to fear of her identity as the Avenger being exposed. Brittany attempts to jump over a sofa only to get monkey flipped out through a window, forcing Gen to make the save. In the middle of everything, the Avenger is knocked out and taken hostage. Danielle wakes up to find herself in an abandoned warehouse, having been stripped to her lingerie and tied up in a chair.
Boy, I hope it was the female supervillains who took off Danielle's clothing. Anyway, one of these other supervillains is a former superheroine named Crush, who has the ability to alter her size and strength. She was obviously an ex-associate of the Avenger until she betrayed the hero and killed another superhero named Vector along the way.
Crush waits for Danielle to wake up and explains what's been going on. The group is called Crime Syndicate X, and they're led by a lightning-powered villain named Tyrant. It turns out that Tyrant has utilized this newfangled thing called the Internet to locate Crush's family and use it as leverage for her to join up with the group, and now he plans to do the same with Avenger.
Yes, it appears we met the people who invented doxing. No doubt internet trolls everywhere are now kneeling in reverence.
However, Brittany, Brianna, and Gen also have a hostage of their own, and they turn him over to the cops shortly after learning the location of Crime Syndicate X's headquarters. They manage to break in, utilizing Gen as a distraction. Unfortunately, they're a little too late, as Tyrant has dug up enough information on the Carter family to convince Avenger to betray the others. However, when Tyrant actually moves to kill Brittany, that proves to be too much for Avenger and Crush, who'd have a change of heart and begin attacking him. Crush manages to get her hands on one of Lasher's lariats and ties Tyrant up, while Avenger takes the other part and pins it to the floor with a knife, thus grounding him, turning him into a giant lightning rod and nullifying his lightning abilities. The villains are turned over to the proper authorities, with Crush also turning herself in for her actions, even if they were under duress.
Our next story sees Gina return to the mystical land of Shangri-La and its chief librarian Khan, who had become something of a romantic interest for her in the previous story arcs involving Atlantis and El Dorado. This is all done much to the chagrin of the Empress of Shangri-La, Lynn, who also fancies Khan for herself.
Lynn begins looking for means to perform a magical spell to break the couple up, likely hitting on one that will make them argue all the time. However, this does require going deeper into the archives for materials. Unfortunately, the archives are located in another dimension, being guarded by an air elemental called Jar. The reason why is that the dimension also houses a group of bloodthirsty griffins who are willing to devour the not-childlike Empress. Gina and Khan are forced to come to Lynn's rescue along the way, wind up deciding that the long-distance pan-dimensional relationship just isn't working out, and agreeing to part ways afterwards, meaning that Lynn doesn't have to perform the spell whatsoever. Gina returns home to Atlanta, where the sisters fill each other in on their recent goings-on before going shopping to get more outfits for another party on El Dorado. Unbeknownst to the Diggers family, a small mouse with mystical powers has literally begun crossing the globe in order to attack the sisters. However, that's going to have to wait, as it turns out Brianna managed to rework the teleporter with a hair trigger so that it now goes off while Brittany is in the middle of changing into her dress. After inadvertently flashing the royal family, the Digger sisters wind up getting taken down into the catacombs of El Dorado. It turns out this is where the remnants of the tier ship that crashed in the Amazon have been stayed throughout the centuries. However, the group is actually being spied on by two humanoid rabbit-seeming characters who are plotting to kill them. However, Brittany overhears the two talking as she's on her way to the ladies' room. Another fight breaks out, with the male rabbit Roll telling the female rabbit Jan to teleport away and activate something. Jan arrives in the group's secret lab and begins activating several predator units.
Roll and Jan are part of a race called the Amarans, who also came from outer space like the Tyr at roughly the same time, though their ship broke apart in Earth's atmosphere, with the main part crashing in Antarctica and the part that Raul and Jan were in crashing alongside the Tyr in El Dorado.
The Amarans are not willing to negotiate, as they just want to go back to their home planet, and seem even less receptive to it as Jan winds up attacking, now wearing some new Predator armor, which she apparently got before Boyd Holbrook could get his hands on it. However, Gina is able to modulate the teleport to naturally wind up neutralizing the armor before anyone can attack, and eventually everyone winds up agreeing to a more peaceful solution.
This would involve locating the crash site of the Amaran ship in Antarctica, which has actually been discovered by some type of space bear who is now guarding it. But first we actually have to deal with the mouse, who is actually the resurrected demonic spirit from the curse that, cursed the Diggers family that led to the creation of Brianna. And added to all of that, we have the new apprentice for Theodore Diggers, who's named Seance, who also exists as another guy for all the girls to flirt with.
The demon goes after Brittany during a weight training session and then chases her to the kitchen, where Brianna manages to trap it with a frying pan. Gen manages to recognize the rodent as some very fortunate help arrives in the form of a government-sponsored demonic pest control team. However, they're unable to locate the mouse before it attacks Brianna in the shower. Eventually, both groups work together to take out the mouse, and then Seon approaches Brittany as he's been getting messages from someone named Cyan, who it turns out is actually Brittany's birth mother. Cyan explains that she only has 24 hours to set everything up. She explains that the werewolves are not fully to blame for what happened to the Cheetah clan. The two factions had entered into a détente of sorts, with the Cheetah clan naturally settling down in Africa. Things went well for a few centuries until a massive famine nearly wiped out most of the food. The only aid appeared in the form of a werewolf leader named Brendan. He claimed that he had found a paradise for both factions to live in and they could both peacefully coexist. In reality, though, Brendan was a powerful sorcerer who had fallen under the tutelage of a dark wizard who lured the cheetahs into a trap and began killing them. This wound up reigniting the war between the cheetahs and the werewolves, and eventually the only survivor would wind up being Brittany, after Brendan had personally slaughtered her parents, and Theodore Diggers had rescued her. However, it turns out Brendan was actually acting of his own accord, as the werewolves eventually managed to stage a revolt, where his sister Chetta managed to challenge him for leadership and defeat him in combat. Brendan was then sentenced to a life of everlasting pain and torture in a dimensional prison. That being said, Brendan is not dead, and right now, forces are amassing to possibly break him free to use him as a weapon against Brittany and the Diggers family. With that, Cyan bids a tearful goodbye and a request for some grandchildren with Stripe.
Also, the Diggers family do manage to locate that crash site and take on the alien space bear, who winds up taking a shape-shifted Gen hostage before attempting to blast off and then crashing into a mountain where it gets cryogenically frozen for a later story.
From there, Gina and Brittany head to Ireland after Gina had gotten word of the existence of an artifact that converts water into metal. However, she's not the only one looking for it, as Penny Pincer got to the Emerald Isle before them and convinced an army of leprechauns to join her in trying to thwart the Diggers. However, before attacking the sisters, the leprechauns get into an argument over who exactly owns the machine, which they obviously use to make their pots of gold. This allows the Diggers to escape, and a high-speed chase ensues until Gina decides to turbo boost her car, which causes it to wind up crashing into a tree. It's then that unlikely help arrives in the form of the werewolf clan. Still untrusting, though, Brittany intends to attack the werewolves only to be quickly knocked out.
The leprechauns do end up returning, but that's a different story for a different time.
Brittany wakes up and she and Gina are introduced to Chief Sander, Jetta's brother, who has news concerning Brendan. Brendan acquired his powers from a dark wizard, but left behind a spell book when Jetta defeated him. They've managed to partially translate the book, and they discovered that Brendan's holding cell in the parallel dimension, which had been lined with deadly wolfsbane to prevent escape, is empty with a message for Brittany written in blood. It turns out that Brendan's former master, a dark wizard known as the Lich King, has freed Brendan and needs him to carry out revenge, in particular on the Diggers family. Sandra takes Gina and Brittany to Eden to inform Jetta about Brendan's escape. She seems to be on good terms with the sisters now, even taking time to help Brittany with her shape-shifting abilities so that she can do it multiple times in a day without losing much power. That being said, the news of Brendan's escape sends Jetta into a rage that Tabian is forced to quell by pointing out that she's recently found out she's pregnant with the couple's second child, so there isn't going to be any fighting. He's going to have to do it all on his own. The werewolves promise to keep the Diggers informed if there are any developments and send them home. Upon arriving back in Atlanta, the two are informed of their visitor. Their mother, Julia, has reappeared for the day.
Julia Diggers is in fact not dead and actually from the mystical realm of Jade, where she is a warrior princess. She encountered Theodore Diggers as he was attempting to become the magical apprentice of her father, King Eldrin. However, Theodore actually wound up costing her in a jousting tournament, so the two did not start off on the right foot. However, they did slowly fall in love, get married, and have Gina in the Earth realm. However, around this time, too, Theodore's father, himself also a powerful wizard, wound up having a magical accident that wound up turning him into a lich. He attempted to kill the rest of the Diggers family, and Julia wound up taking a blast that was intended for Theodore. However, this in reality cursed her to be forever stranded on Jade, except for one day out of the year where she is allowed to return to Earth. And yes, if you haven't figured out, the dark force manipulating things behind the scenes is in fact Grandpa Diggers, who is now a Lich King after conquering several demonic realms.
Funny thing, though, is Brianna points out that the Amarans gifted Gina a bioscanner from their ship, and it revealed that Julia really isn't cursed, she's just out of phase, and that maybe the device that Gina and Brittany used to uncurse themselves, which inadvertently wound up leading to the creation of Brianna, could also be used to pull Julia back into the proper plane of existence. While Gina and Brianna begin setting things up, a portal opens a few miles away from the Diggers' compound, containing several minions of the Lich King. Namely, deposed vampire queen turned personal secretary Natasha, who is sick and tired of having to work for the Lich King as he constantly requires her to sit on his lap while performing the morning briefings.
Ew.
While Natasha, her vampire assistant Vlad, and another demon named Dirk begin wreaking havoc, the Lich King sits away in his chief office, pining away from his dark secret, which is that he's exhausted much of his magical abilities, and that can't be renewed as his body is dying out. To that end, he needs to transfer his soul into a new, younger body, namely Gina's.
Ew!
On the plus side, the scanning machine works and Julia is returned to the proper realm of existence. Actually, she and Theodore then proceed to slip away for some alone time.
I'm actually okay with this.
Sadly, all the super happy fun time is interrupted by Theodore sensing the demonic portals opening up. The two prepare for battle as Gina and Brittany are actually at a museum trying to get their latest treasure appraised, which turns out to be at least enough to cover their credit card debt. However, this gets interrupted by a group of skeleton demons invading and trying to grab Gina.
While this is playing out, Natasha, the vampire queen / chief secretary of the Lich King, is in fact taking on a character called Mimi Masters from a series called Ninja High School that was also published by Antarctic Press, and that Fred Perry did some artwork for on several occasions. I really can't tell you that much more.
This is halted by the arrival of Theodore and Julia, who make quick work of Natasha's minions and co-workers. The lackeys are soon dealt with, but Gina and Brittany have been taken hostage as Natasha orders them deposited on Jade.
Gina and Brittany are being looked after by Brendan, the werewolf that slaughtered Brittany's family, and Rook, a dark knight from the realm of Jade, who is obviously under the Lich King's employ.
Brendan is then dispatched to locate a magical obelisk capable of channeling all magic from magic practitioners through it and into one being. The news of the existence of such an object piques Natasha's interest. However, Rook has bigger concerns as Theodore, Julia, Tark, Gen, and Mesha arrive on Jade. Having plenty of experience with Rook, Julia heads out on her own to try to break her daughters free from his castle. In fact, she actually winds up confronting Rook along the way and tricks him into teleporting into a wall in order to defeat him. It's all for naught, though, as Gina and Brittany are already trying to escape in their own built power armor. Julia winds up reuniting with her daughters, and the three head off to the local village, which is very anti-Rook, and so they can hide. While relaxing and enjoying some brunch at the local inn, the trio are approached by an angry patron willing to throw down. It's all a joke, though, as it turns out this is Garfield.
Please, speak to me. Just one game show.
Garfield, or Gar as he prefers to be called, is actually Julia's protege from when she was stranded on Jade. He's not exactly a were-jaguar, but rather a jaguar, a cat person that actually becomes stronger when they transform into full human mode.
The only one not having any fun is Brittany, who's really feeling the itch to go face Brendan. Theodore Diggers has had a long-held anti-revenge stance. However, Brittany feels that Brendan's actions call for the only one proper action to take place. Despite Julia's pleas, Brittany heads off on her own. As for Brendan, he arrives at the castle holding the magic sapper, where Tabian and Sander are actually waiting for him, having pieced together his plans for the artifact. However, the disgraced werewolf leader is able to easily reacquire his spellbook and knock out his opponents with relative ease. However, before he can deliver a killing blow, Brittany arrives and swipes the spellbook back. Brendan taunts her, pointing out that there was actually a third, more powerful Were-Cat faction that was looking to unite with the Cheetahs, so Brendan had to take preventative measures in order to protect the werewolf clan. She tears the spellbook apart, and that appears to nullify many of his powers. The two begin engaging in physical combat until Brittany manages to snap Brendan's spine and paralyze him. Unfortunately, he manages to land within arm's reach of the magic sapper, and soon, magic practitioners all across Jade, including Theodore, Tark, and a few others, begin losing their magic connection and powers.
Basically, in Gold Digger, there's two ways one becomes a magic practitioner. Either they are born with it, if you're like Gen or the elf Misha, or if you're like Theodore Diggers, who had to apprentice himself to a more powerful magician to learn magic. Like I said earlier, that's how he encountered Jade. He was an apprentice to her father, Eldrin.
Back in the realm of the Lich King, Vlad and Natasha have pieced together that their overlord is losing his power, and that's why he needs Gina. Unfortunately, the Lich King has been spying on them the whole time, and he orders the two captured and demoted down to the custodial staff. However, it turns out that Vlad managed to swipe the king's laptop and CD-ROM containing his magic spells. That being said, the only way the two are going to be able to figure any of this out is to hide in the one place where Lich King can't detect them, the ladies' room.
So I guess the ruler of all darkness has some scruples.
The Lich King wants to stop the vampires, but his power levels are far too low, meaning he needs Gina's body now and has to dispatch his 3 new personal secretaries to Jade to attack and hopefully bring back Gina alive and unharmed. Meanwhile, a troll friend of Julia's named Broad shows the Diggers that Brendan has imprisoned Brittany in a flattening orb. However, she can't do much of anything as he can read her thoughts. Eventually, her incessant whining gets him to the point that he has no choice but to turn her to stone instead. To that end, Gina has begun working on some technological means to thwart their enemies. She assists Gar and Brianna in constructing a plane just as a group of dragons appear in the sky. They manage to take down the cadre of reptiles, however they wind up crashing the plane and Gina gets taken hostage and taken back to the realm of the Lich King. Meanwhile, Brendan attacks Theodore, Julia, and the others. Theodore recognizes the magic zapper and tells everyone to try to avoid it at their best chance. Tark manages to grab a mirror and uses it to interrupt a blast meant for Broad, the troll.
I should point out that there was a brief thread through this story about the fact that elves and trolls are actually kind of racist towards each other.
The magic zapper winds up getting knocked from Brendan's grasp, where it winds up being teleported back to the castle, and all the magic is returned to its proper users. Brendan tries to reacquire the magic zapper. Unfortunately, it can only be used by an individual once in their lives. The second time, it just winds up disintegrating their bodies, which is what happens to Brendan. With that, Theodore elects to teleport to the Lich King's realm to take on his father and rescue Gina. That being said, Theodore is being unnotably aided by none other than Natasha and Vlad, who have freed Gina in order to have her power up a new weapon to take down the Lich King. She develops a new type of power armor with an anti-magic shield generator, then inserts herself into the battle between her father and grandfather. She manages to grab hold of the Lich King and activates the anti-magic generator, which nullifies his powers. And although he can't perform a direct attack, Theodore is able to sap away the remaining power of the Lich King and to completely nullify his abilities, rendering him completely useless. Theodore and Gina then elect to head home as Natasha is installed as Queen of the Vampires and prepares to give her new powerless personal secretary a good swift kick in the ass.
And that concludes our look at Volume 1 of the Gold Digger Archives. Or I guess to be more precise, the rest of Volume 1 of the Gold Digger Archives. How was it? Well, I do think there's some good characterization throughout all of this. I think there's good humor throughout this book. I do like the mix of action and technology and mysticism. And it does have a good kind of pulpy adventure feel to it, with some good humor, like I said, through all the characters. And I do think that the final Lich King story arc is actually quite interesting and fun. If there is a drawback, it's, again, the overabundance of sex jokes in this. It's not as bad as the early part of this, where like every third panel was a character either talking about someone wanting to be getting laid, lacking in getting laid, or getting laid themselves, or immediately hopping on the first man they see. And it's not that bad. There's still quite a bit of it, though. Example, again, Gina's grandfather wanting to possess her body is in this. I would point out that a way early story that we talked about, which was Brianna attempting to seduce Gen, which just brings up way too many questions. And also, there's kind of a part of me that, while I like the artwork and I accept that this is very cheesecakey and it's fairly well done cheesecake, there are times where, again, there seems to be like some near wardrobe malfunctions going on, especially with Brittany. Just go on and do the nudity. Like, I wouldn't show it on this show, but again, it's one of those, you're holding back a little too much. Like, this is not a book for kids. I don't think anyone would mistake it for a book for kids. So yeah, it just kind of falls apart a little bit in that aspect. Like I said, this is not a book for kids. This is not an all ages book, so I wouldn't recommend this to everyone. But if you like good humor, good fun, with a nice action adventuring pulp twist, it's perfectly fine. Gold Digger art, this Gold Digger story arc gets a B. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can help support the channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcat productions. There you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. And as always, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.